Hey guys, my name is Kevin and this is Carrie, and welcome to the Bully Brave podcast where we chat about nurturing confident youth and creating positive learning environments. With us here today, we have a very special guest, Dr. Eastwood. Now, before we jump into the questions, we'll be talking about things like mental health, self-esteem, what is good mental health, and how to work towards good mental health. If you can quickly describe, about your practice and what it is you do.
Sure. Thanks for having me here today.
Yeah.
First of all, it's a real pleasure to be here. I'm a psychologist and I have a private practice here in Brampton. And really what our practice is about is helping children, teenagers, and adults live healthy lives in terms of their mental health. So we see kids and teenagers and adults for a lot of different reasons. Maybe it's difficulties with mood or anxiety, stress, problems in social relationships. We also provide support to people who are dealing with various neurodevelopmental disorders. So that's things like autism spectrum disorder, learning disabilities, ADHD, those kinds of concerns. So our job is to help understand what's going on, because sometimes these problems are not diagnosed, and so we really want to make sure that we understand what's going on and then provide people with the kind of help they need to live as full a life as possible.
Beautiful. And the one difficulty we had with planning this conversation is there's so much we can talk about with
Absolutely,
you.
yeah.
From everything you mentioned, we could have hour-long conversations about all those things. But the one thing we really decided we wanted to focus on was the concept of self-esteem, and how when kids are growing up nowadays, there's a lot of adversity when it comes to developing your own self-esteem based on social media as a tool for vanity and et cetera. So what's your experience with self-esteem specifically in youth?
Well, I agree that self-esteem, is a big concern, and it's really often a big reason why kids and teenagers are brought to my practice, right? So, what might be happening is that a young person says very harsh, critical things about themselves, or maybe starts behaving differently. Maybe they're pulling back from their family, from their friends. And when parents and teachers notice a change in behavior like this, or they hear something that a young person says, it can be really alarming. Children can say very harsh things about themselves, and then when parents or teachers witness that, they're understandably concerned and they bring the young person in to see me. And in terms of helping to nurture a healthier self-esteem, the first thing that I want to do is try to understand kind of what's the reason that the child is feeling this way about themselves, because there can be many different things going on, right? So when you think about the life of a child, there are many contexts that are so central to their day-to-day experience. There's their home life, of course, and also their life at school. Kids spend a lot of time at school, right? And what happens there can have a big impact on how they're feeling about themselves. And then, of course, their social world, which in today's age is that much more complex, because it's not just the face-to-face interactions, but also all the interactions over social media. So, like, broadly speaking, those are three major big contexts that I want to make sure I do a thorough assessment of to understand, where things are going wrong. So when I see a young person who's struggling with self-esteem, the kinds of questions that I ask are things like, is this child enjoying meaningful relationships with their family and their friends? Are there contexts in their life where maybe they're being ridiculed or rejected or treated harshly, either by an adult or a peer in any context in their lives? Are they able to meet the expectations of their life? So, at school, for example, are they struggling to meet the expectations that teachers have for them? Sometimes children with an undiagnosed learning disability, may be falling behind and feeling very badly about themselves, assuming that something's wrong with them, when really the problem is that they learn differently, and we just don't understand that yet about them, and we don't know what kinds of tools they need to be successful. So by figuring out that piece of things, we can help address the self-esteem concern.
And I just want to pause you there and explore what you just said in regards to discovery, discovering what it is, and letting that process find out what is the root cause of said issue. So if I'm a teacher or an educator, and I notice somebody's having a hard time, you mentioned that one question, and I can't think of it now, but it was a powerful question. What are some methods I can use to seek out that root cause?
I think just being open and available and ready to listen. You know, it has been teachers that have brought kids to my practice before, like not directly, but through raising that flag to parents, because kids will open up when given the opportunity. So kids will sometimes look for a writing project in school. They might disclose something, or you read their writing and you can see, wow, there's something, you know, really difficult here that this child is struggling with. They're disclosing something very negative about themselves in the context of this kind of benign school assignment.
Right.
Okay, then, you know, the teachers that I've interacted with, you know, are very concerned for their students. They'll pick up the phone, they'll call the parent, say, you know, this is what your child disclosed at school. You know, please take your child to see somebody where they can talk about these things further.
And
so it's just being available and open and to listen.
Gotcha.
You know?
And I can see that if we don't nurture a positive self-esteem, that this can snowball into some deeper mental health issues. It can lead to
Absolutely.
anxiety, it can lead to not wanting to go to school.
Yeah.
So making sure that we identify as soon as we can that there is an issue.
These root things, right?
Yeah.
And so I know we talked as a teacher, as a parent, how can we support? Because I truly believe that it's the community together that's going to support this child. So we have the teacher supporting, and we have the parents supporting, obviously, and we have our professionals supporting. So as a parent, how do I recognize and support my child going through this process?
Well, I think there's a lot of things that parents can do, and I think a lot of it just boils down to that communication piece, right? So children who have a healthy self-esteem tend to be in families where there's respect between all members of the family, where people listen to one another, where accomplishments are celebrated together, where mistakes are not ignored, they're acknowledged, but they're also accepted, right? So a mistake is not something that makes you less than, right? You're not punished for it, but you don't pretend they don't exist either. And I think that's an important point. Like, nurturing a child's self-esteem isn't just about telling them that they're great, right? Nurturing a child's self-esteem is about helping them to find avenues in life where they can truly be successful at something. It has to be something that's personally meaningful for them, right? So we can't just impose our own ideas of what they should be good at or what they should care about. I mean, we share that with our kids, certainly, but each child has to find what's personally meaningful for them. And they really have to develop some skill in that area, right, that they can be justifiably proud of, right?
So what's the influence of self-talk in that? Because way back you referenced the voice in your head and how important that is. And a lot of work we've done for our own development has involved the importance of being aware of your self-talk. Because, you know, like 90% of the things you hear is your own. It's your own thoughts. You're having conversations with yourself. So in that process of developing self-esteem, of being exposed to positive references of, hey, I accomplished this and this is important to me, where does self-talk sit?
Well, self-talk is critical, right? And it's self-talk about, again, our accomplishments and also our challenges and how we talk to ourselves about those things. And I think the self-talk can be, you know, modeled by the people in our lives, right? So as parents, like if we're talking about what parents can do to support kids, or teachers too, we can model self-talk, right? So, you know, it's easy to be hard on yourself, right? Like, oh, I lost my keys again, what a stupid idiot, right? And sometimes we say these things without thinking, you know, without realizing that somebody's watching and listening, right? And so we all make mistakes, and every time we make a mistake, it's an opportunity to model healthy self-talk to kids, right? And, you know, we all struggle with that from time to time. You know, we can, I think part of being kind of a, you know, a driven or achievement-oriented person is that you have goals and expectations for yourself, and it's normal to feel disappointed, right, when you don't meet your expectations that you had for yourself, right? But we can all work on taking a step back and saying, okay, so how can I learn from this experience? How can I talk to myself in such a way that helps me move forward and shows my children, you know, a way to move forward in a healthy way?
Now, do you find that, you know, talking about self-esteem and self-esteem, obviously it comes from self, and that, that not just students, but people will try to get self-esteem from outside sources. For example, social media, that immediate gratification when I put up a post that people like me, I feel liked, I feel loved. People, you know, they say how great I look, and
It's like a high, but then it fizzles.
Yeah, absolutely. This is such a big issue. You know, I think concern about what other people think of me and, you know, am I liked or not liked, that's always been an issue for adolescents, right? But I think it's all amplified now that we have social media being so much a part of the social experience for kids. And I hear kids talking about this all the time, and the stress of social media can often be another reason why teenagers are brought to see me, when sometimes things escalate to a point, like there might be one very difficult interaction that's evolved over social media or instances of cyberbullying. These are all events that can lead a young person to need professional help, because it can get that intense, right? But yes, I hear teenagers talking about it all the time. They'll do things like compare the number of likes they have to the number of followers they have, and then say, oh, well, I have 200 followers, but only 50 people like this post. That means
they don't like me.
They don't like me, and so it is a really big issue, and I think for both girls and boys, but I worry especially for girls, and they seem to be posting a lot of images of themselves on social media, and then to get that attention and that feedback, and
get that boost. Right?
That's right, and the thing is it's a boost that doesn't last, right? It makes you feel better, it's a high, and but it doesn't actually feed your self-esteem in any real meaningful way. So I think it's really important to talk to young people, you know, about these dynamics, right? So they can be more aware of what's happening here.
Do you think that's been the biggest effect with social media on youth? Like, has there been anything else that's come up in your conversations?
I think that's probably one of the bigger issues for sure. It's a challenge, because I don't think social media is all bad, right? It's definitely a way.
It's a tool.
It's a tool. It's a way for people to communicate. There's actually been a recent documentary that I think is really helpful in terms of talking about the issues of social media affecting young people, and also just technology use in general, other issues like gaming addiction, that kind of thing, which I think can be a big issue for youth as well. It's called Screenagers. It's very neat.
That's a good
name. Screenagers. Yeah, and they talk about a lot of the research that we're now learning more and more about in terms of understanding the impact on people. But there's like a dopamine hit in the brain when you get likes, right? So it's like this real instant kind of chemical reaction that really drives, like it makes this experience addictive, really.
That's what an addiction is that dopamine hit, right? So it is, absolutely. So how do we have that conversation with the teens or youth? I don't want to say teens, because unfortunately there's young children on this and doing the same thing. How do we have that conversation that, you know, this is not where you're going to get your self-worth?
Yeah. Well, I think you're right. Like young kids are using social media
Yeah.
more and more. And I would argue that the conversation has to start well before kids start using social media.
Yeah.
And then once they're on social media, the conversation, has to be ongoing, right? So, I would suggest that, we need to assess for each individual child, are they ready for this tool? So, I would ask a young person, you're thinking about giving them access to social media, asking them, well, who are you going to follow and why? And who are you going to allow to follow you? Do you think you should have a public account or a private account? Why? What's going to happen when you post a picture and nobody likes it?
Yeah.
What's that going to mean? What if you post a picture and everybody likes it?
Right.
What does that mean? Right? So I think having those kinds of conversations ahead of time would give you as a parent insight into, okay, can my child handle this
Yeah.
pressure, right? I mean, you never know for sure until you're into it, and you can't anticipate everything, but also that conversation, I would hope, helps almost protect or immunize your child against those pressures, at least starting out, so they get that message from you as a parent that, hey, there's lots of different ways to interpret these things that happen on social media.
Super important. The term we use the most is ethical use of social media. So what is that? And I think over the next years that'll be discovered. But for now, we're still in this limbo where these youth are growing up without a guidebook for how to handle social media. So there's a few disconnects. So they're not learning it from parents or educators, and then leaves these gaps. And then they tend to, make posts for their own vanity and self-esteem, and that's when we go down that path. So for us as educators to have those types of conversations, all those questions you were asking, like what's going to happen when you get no likes, that's phenomenal.
How are you
Yeah.
going to feel?
Yeah,
What's
Like
that gonna
to
do?
open those doors earlier and say, look, this is what's behind the curtain.
right.
There's nothing mythical here.
Yeah,
This is that might not be the ethical use of social media, but at least it opens everything up.
that's right.
So they can
Yeah.
start digesting and figuring out in their own minds how
Yeah.
they're going to structure it mentally.
Yeah.
No, that's phenomenal. And do you want to touch mental health now, or?
Yeah, so there's definitely been a lot more awareness over the last few years on mental health. First of all, can you explain what good mental health is and what does that mean?
Sure. So when we talk about mental health, like it's helpful sometimes to contrast that to physical health. So
Okay.
physical health is kind of the wellness in your physical body. Mental health is the wellness in your mental body, right?
Okay.
Or your psychological well-being. And so what we're really talking about there is how healthy are your emotions, how healthy are your thought processes, and how healthy is your behavior day to day, right? So we look at all that together, and that's what we talk about when we talk about mental health. If we're talking about what is good mental health, I actually like the definition that's provided by the World Health Organization on their website, so I'll just refer to it here. So they say that mental health is defined as a state of well-being in which an individual realizes his or her own potential, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community.
Interesting.
So they're highlighting, I think, the effects really of being, healthy in terms of our emotions, our thinking, and our behavior day to
And
day.
the big thing I'm noticing on social media, most notably, is that everybody's fighting the stigma of mental health. That over the past 2 years, the school board, the School Ministry of Education has just really pushed for mental health this year as well.
Yeah.
And the stigma is kind of being removed.
Yeah.
Where beforehand, having a conversation about this, anxiety isn't a thing, depression is not a thing.
Yeah.
So now, hopefully, that'll lead to having conversations towards what is good mental health versus just saying this is how it looks when it's bad.
Yeah. Well, and this is where social media has been really helpful,
Very much
right?
so. Exactly.
So, I think social media has really been helping to break down the stigma and make it easier for people to talk about their experiences, and various initiatives put out by, Bell Let's Talk, that kind of thing, or there's other initiatives by the Ontario Psychological Association or whatever, just to promote
Mental health.
open discussion, right?
Exactly.
What have you seen? with this awareness, have you seen a rise in mental health? And what do you think would be the leading contributor? Because how long have you been a psychologist?
Well, I've been a psychologist since 2003,
Okay.
a licensed psychologist since 2003, and I started my private practice in Brampton in 2005.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't think I've seen an increase so much, but then again, I think I have a pretty specific experience,
course.
right?
Yeah,
So I'm always seeing people that, are coming ready for help, right?
Right.
So I think if you're in a community-based setting, such as a school, maybe you would see more changes over time. But I do recognize that there's more awareness and more openness to talk about it. And I definitely see, like, the kinds of changes that I see are more concerns related to social media use or,
Right.
just unmonitored social media use that's gone totally awry, right?
And this question may be similar to the self-esteem that we just finished talking about, but nurturing good mental health in somebody, youth, when you're a teacher or a parent, how does that look like?
I think it's pretty similar to nurturing healthy self-esteem too, really. I guess it's just really getting to know kids, understanding their experience, looking for, certainly when it comes to mental health, if you see disruptions or changes in a young person's behavior, then that's always, a warning sign.
If you're an educator and you see, well, a parent as well, and you see your child or a child taking a turn for the worst, mental health wise, and starting to have their self-esteem being affected, and that stems to other issues as we just finished discussing. How do you approach that kind of subject?
I think it's important for parents and teachers to know what resources and supports are out there.
Okay.
So, and again, this is where the increasing awareness is really helpful. My sense is that people are more aware. Often people will go to their family doctor first if there's a concern, and family doctors are such a helpful support, and they know where to direct families for help and support. So I guess I just want to encourage parents and teachers, when your child comes to you and says something that's alarming or stressful, try to take a deep breath, right, and say, okay, they're coming to me, right?
Exactly.
So you want to keep the lines of communication open, and even though you might be very anxious inside, hearing, what your child might be saying to you, to take a deep breath and say, oh, can you tell me more about that? Right? So, and then, as I think sometimes if a young person senses that their parent is freaking out, then they'll just be like, okay, I can't tell you this, right? Like, this is too much for you.
They're testing, they test.
Yeah.
If you're open to it, then more things, and the conversation keeps going.
Right.
We just finished having that conversation with somebody.
Yeah. In general, kids, one way that I encourage parents is to say, listen, when your child comes to you with a problem, you very much want to guide them and help them solve the problem, right? And I think it's a normal instinct to want to jump in there and offer solutions, right? Well, did you think about it this way, or did you try that, right? But sometimes what the child really needs is just someone to listen, right? So, and I think we all feel that way too, don't we? Like if I have a problem, I don't necessarily want someone to tell me what to do. I just want someone to listen, and kids are no different. And so, but through that listening process, kids will tell you more about what's going on with them.
I have a last question, and then
Absolutely.
I'll leave it to you. When it comes to dealing with youth who are being repeatedly bullied, whether it's on social media or in person at school, have you dealt with that kind of situation, and what are some things that you work on with them?
Well, I have to say most often I'm dealing kind of with the aftermath of those kinds of situations,
Right.
rather than in the thick of it. But I do think it's essential, if that is happening, to intervene at at every level, right?
Okay.
It's important for teachers to be aware of what's going on, for the principal to be aware of what's going on, for there to be conversations about what's happening and a plan to end the abuse,
Yeah.
end the bullying, and keep that individual student safe, right? So the student safety should be the priority. And it is complicated because, you know, sometimes it's hard to figure out the truth of any situation or what's happening. But I think we have to try. I think we have to sort
when
it
you're
out.
dealing with that, the victims or the target's mental state afterwards, what's that conversation look like with them?
Often it's about trying to make sense of the experience,
Okay.
right? And to correct misperceptions that may still exist, right? So when someone goes through a traumatic experience, whether it's bullying on social media or any traumatic experience, sometimes the mind makes sense of what's happened in ways that are less than helpful, right? For example, blaming oneself
I was gonna say self-blame,
Right.
yeah.
for what happened.
It's not your fault.
Or dwelling on, you know, what could have happened differently so that the event didn't happen, right? We can't always, you know, in hindsight, you know, we can look back and see how things could have been different, but, you know, in the moment, we don't have control
No.
over all those factors, right? So it's about helping young people find a way to move forward and learn from the experience.
Of course.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, for sure. So we've talked about a lot of different, there's so much we can go on with you, Dr. Eastwood. You have so much experience. Is there anything that we haven't asked you about, you know, dealing with a bullying situation with youth, or anything that you wanted to add in regards to
Mental health,
mental health,
self-esteem.
well-being?
I don't think so. I mean, I'm feeling very hopeful for today's youth and the youth that are coming in the future, because I think that where we used to be kind of behind the eight ball, so to speak, trying to realizing after the fact, oh my goodness, look at the impact that the internet and social media is having on our youth, with, you know, sort of horrible situations that have unfolded before anyone could really anticipate what was happening.
Right.
I think now we're seeing more clearly kind of what are the benefits and risks, and how to arm our kids so that they can use these tools effectively and ethically. And I'm very hopeful. I think just the resources are going to continue to grow and develop. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if there's curriculum in schools in the future talking to kids about these
Definitely think so.
issues, right? Like I already see that
Yeah.
developing, but
Us too.
I think it'll grow and become more systematic, and then I think people will be healthier as a result.
Now, as is tradition here on the podcast, you're able to provide a Be Brave tip
And be brave tip.
for our educators, parents out there who are listening. Something that's a highlight, maybe throughout your career, something that you've been thinking about a lot, or something through our conversation that you think these people, you know, if there's one thing I'd want them to implement, this would be it, or at least consider.
I guess my be brave tip would be listen. Yeah,
Active listening, right?
yeah, for sure.
So important. Well, thank you so much for taking your time to come out. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me. It's been a pleasure being here.
Yes.
We'll see you next time.
All right.